Okay, thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Joanne Alfafara, and this is Qdabra's weekly webinar. We usually start at 8:05 Pacific time. I think we're still waiting for more people. I can see we have 29 in our attendees list. We have a large group today. If you are ready, I can go ahead and start with my presentation. So today we're going to talk about InfoPath Forms and task lists and how to optimize your InfoPath Forms using Task XTP. So what we have today is basically an XTP, a template part that is task-based, and this template part can be integrated with the task list in SharePoint, and you can easily inject it to your forms. So I'm going to give a brief explanation of how we created that XTP and how we used CAML to submit list items to the task list. So as usual, this webinar requires audio. I'll start out by a quick presentation of my slides explaining the task XTP, and then followed up by a demo of how to configure the task XTP in your forms. And then at the end of the presentation, we're going to have time for questions and answers. So SharePoint Task. Most of you might already be familiar about how tasks work in SharePoint. Task is an out-of-the-box list type in SharePoint. Like when you create a new team site in SharePoint, it comes with a task list by default, as you can see in my screenshot. This is a new team site that I created, and it comes with several lists like announcements, calendar links, and it also comes with this task list that most of the time we just don't notice it. But a task list is a very powerful list because this list can be associated with workflows, and these fields can be customized to have some fields like assigned to, status, priority, and other fields like percent completed. Descriptions can also be added to this task list. There are a lot of benefits with using SharePoint task list because you can manage tasks within a team. You can also track tasks on your plate. You can actually create multiple task lists because when you go to view all site content and click create, you can select list from there and then select to create a task list. So you can create multiple task lists. For example, if you have 4 different projects, you can create 4 different task lists for each project, and you can customize the way the task lists are displayed for each project. Some people also customize the columns and add permissions to the task list such that it only allows specific group to add or update and delete the task within that list. So those are just some of the benefits that comes with using SharePoint task list. Why do you want to use InfoPath Forms with SharePoint tasks? Well, in general, we all deal with a lot of tasks every day, and if you're using InfoPath, those forms are always going to be associated with one task or another. So we thought about creating this task template part to make it easier for users to view the task items within the InfoPath form. And as usual, this is a template part that can be customized and can be reused throughout all of your forms, and it's completely codeless. Here at Qdabra, we always try to implement stuff without using any code. And this task XTP also writes back to the list, the task list, using CAML. If you have attended our past webinar, we also have a similar topic that talks about how to integrate tasks in your InfoPath forms, and that webinar explains how to do that using QRules. But in this scenario, we are going to talk about a template part that is using the CAML version. So what is CAML? CAML is a collaborative application markup language. It is actually a XML-based language which provides data constructs that build up SharePoint fields, and it can be used to query, create, and update list items in SharePoint. So it's basically an XML-based query language that contains some tags. If you're familiar with XML, this is how to set up the CAML template. You can see that I'm using a batch element here, which is the tag, and if you see the method line, I'm using cmd equals update because that is the action that I want to happen for this task template part. Actually, you can change that action to new or delete if necessary, but in this scenario, we want to update the task item in the task list in SharePoint. And underneath, you will see the SharePoint task list image I have here. I have highlighted the columns that I use to map to the CAML template. I have title assigned to status and ID, and I use that as field name to my CAML template to map the fields that I want to submit to the task list. If you need help in building the CAML query, I believe there are some tools available out there for building CAML queries that can help you. One of the tools that I use to build this CAML template is called the U2U CAML Query Builder. If you want to search that, Google that. Hopefully that will help you build your CAML query in this scenario. So the task XTP that we're giving out is already pre-configured with rules and data connection. You just need to modify it to adjust to your own servers. You don't need to create them from scratch, but for the purpose of showing you how we created the task XTP, this is just a brief overview of what you'll see in that XTP. We've set it up to connect to that CAML template, and there are two data connections in that template part. There is a data connection that queries the task list, and there is also an XML data connection that queries the CAML template. And we've also designed this task XTP to have sections and repeating tables that are filtered to show some tasks that are pending and also tasks that are completed. It also has an approve and reject buttons. If you approve the task list item in a task list will change status to approved, and if you reject it, the status will change to rejected. And this is how the task XTP looks. On top is a repeating table that displays the current pending task list available. It has a title and shows who the task item is assigned to. And in the middle part, there is a section that shows a drop-down where you can select the task title that you want to approve or reject. And underneath the buttons, there is a completed tasks section that shows all the completed tasks for the particular form where this task XTP is injected to. And also, if you notice, there is also an expand and collapse buttons there for the tasks and the completed tasks sections. So if a user decides to hide the section, they can just click the expand and collapse buttons. So why care about using Task XTP in InfoPath Forms? Well, I care about it because it's a template part, and using template parts means consistent tasks sections in all of your forms, and it's easy to add, easy to use. Like I said, you can expand, collapse, hide the sections if you don't want to see them. You can also approve tasks without navigating to the task list because you approve and reject the task within the InfoPath form itself. It's also customizable because you can modify the template part the way you want it. You can change the formatting if you want. And if you are familiar with InfoPath, you may play around with it and change the rules to customize it to work with your own solution. As long as you know how the logic works, how to integrate it to the task list, you can customize it. And again, it's completely codeless. We didn't add any code to this template part, so any InfoPath beginner can start injecting this to their forms, and by following the documents they're ready to go with their forms with a task XTP in it. And also the cool thing about this is you add a task workflow to the form library where you will publish the form to, and that task workflow will generate an email to the assignee of the task saying that, hey, you have a task pending and you need to approve this, etc. And that task workflow will also send email notification once the task is completed. So that's also one of the advantages of using task lists. So the package that we're giving out to you contains the XTP along with a documentation that you can follow on how to configure this task XTP to your forms. And this is just a list of steps summarized to show you how we configure this XTP to a sample form, an expense report form. So the first thing to do is inject the task XTP to the InfoPath form, and then you would need to modify the data connections to point to your SharePoint site, of course. And then you would need to have a field in your form that will serve as an identifier. So the task XTP knows where or what to get from the task list. And then you need to know the list grid of your task list and add a field to your form that will hold that grid. And then you also need to add a submit data connection to the update list items web service, because that's what the CAML template uses to submit to the task list. And then add a rule to the buttons to use that submit data connections. And then after all is set, you can just publish your form to SharePoint. And then the last thing you want to do is add a task workflow to your SharePoint library. So I'm now going to proceed with the actual demo. This is a sample expense report form where we're going to inject the task template part 2. And this expense report form is already configured to submit to a form library in my SharePoint site. So if you want to use this sample form to learn how to use the task XTP, you will need to modify the form library here to submit to your own library. And then my expense report here also has this title field that will serve as an identifier for the form. It's just basically concatenating expense report dash the name of the person submitting the expense report and then the report date. So to inject the XTP, you go to the Home tab and open the Controls pane. Click Add or Remove Custom Controls, and then click Add. Oops. Let me see if I have it added here. Yeah. It's already added because I added it earlier. So to add it, select Template Part, click Next, and then browse to the template part. And finish. And then if you scroll down to the bottom of the controls pane, you would see this Qdabra tasks. And before adding that to the form, you would want to put your cursor to the place where you want to add the template part or the template part section. So I always want to place it on top so that the user can easily see the tasks section. So after putting the cursor there, just click the template part. And the section will be added to your form. And I'll just adjust here to fit it to the expense report table. And as you can see, the template part data source is also added to my my main data source here. You can also see the instructions in red text. And the second part that you need to do is, let me first close this, controls pane. Highlight this repeating table and then open manage rules, and you would want to edit the second formatting rule, which is hide rows, and then click on the condition, and then on the third drop down select a field or group, and then change the fields drop down to the main data source, and then select the title from the main data source. And just repeat that in the completed tasks table here. Select the title. And you also need to edit the drop-down task ID, which is displaying the task title. So right-click on it and then select drop-down list box properties. And then just beside the entries, click select XPath. And then filter data, click modify. And then on the second condition here, select the third drop-down where it says title and click select field or group, and then change again to the main data source and select the title field. And just say OK to close all of this. And then the third part is you would need to edit the grid of the list here. Double click on the list field, and you would see here that I have added the grid as a default value, and that's the grid of my list, of my task list. If you don't know the grid of your task list, you can go to the tasks list, go to the list settings, and here you can select audience targeting settings, and just copy the URL to a notepad. So everything inside the brackets is the grid of your tasks. So copy that and paste it here in your list default value and just say OK. So after doing that, you will need to add a data connection to submit data using a SharePoint web service. To a web service, and type in your SharePoint site. I hope that is right. Yes. So in the list of operations, just select Update List Items and then click Next. For the list name parameter, you would need to select the list field that contains the the grid of the list. And then for the updates parameter, select the CAML template. So for this template part, the CAML template is called add tasks template underscore Qdabra tasks. So select that and then select the root node batch and then say OK. And then in this drop down for include, select XML subtree including selected elements. And then just leave everything and then click next. And you can name it whatever you want. Finish and close. And after adding that submit data connection, add a rule to your buttons to submit using that submit data connection. So add an action rule just underneath copy values rule and call it submit to SharePoint, and add an action that submits data using the web service submit that you just created. And then copy this rule to the reject button and let's just move it up a bit here. So after you edit the buttons, you would need to modify the task list data connection to query your own task list. This is the task query that queries my task list. And if you configure this task XTP to your own form, you would need to edit this data connection. But at this point, I don't need to edit it because it's already pointing to my own task list. And everything is all set. We just need to publish this to the form library. And I think this is already published. Let's just save it as using a different name, and then I can just click publish. Publishing is taking a while, but hopefully it will be done in a moment. Okay, so if we go to the form library where we publish the expense report, here you would need to add a task workflow. In my form library, I already have the task workflow here, but if you create yours, you would need to go to the library settings, select workflow settings, and select add a workflow, and then for the workflow template, select approval, give your workflow a name, for example, task approval, and then this is the important thing. You need to select the task list in this drop down, and then check Start this workflow when a new item is created. And when you click Next, it will take you to another, oops, that's because I have already specified that name. Let's try this. It will take you to another page where you will enter the approvers for your task list, and you can enter a specific person or a group of users for the approvers in this particular form. And you can also modify and change the settings. You can add due date for all tasks, or you can modify other settings here. But I've simplified things, and I just added myself to the assigned to fields for the purpose of this demo. So if we go back to the form library, I already have the workflow there, and this is my task list. Let's just delete. Okay, so let's create a new form, a new expense report form, and it will open the form in the browser. Oops. And because my mistake, I didn't delete the red text there, but that can be deleted after you configured and published the form. So if you expand this, you will not see any task because this form is not yet submitted. So I'm going to go ahead and fill out this form. So click Submit. So there's the email notification. It's telling me that I need to approve this expense report submitted by this person. So if I open the form, and expand the task XTP, there is the pending task that is assigned to me. And if I select the task title, and after doing that, the approve and reject buttons will enable. I can also add a comment here. And then click approve. I expand it again, there's no more pending task because I've already finished that task, and it goes down to the completed task table. If you expand the table completed task, it will show the task that I just approved. And if we refresh the task list, it will show the task list item for that particular form, and the status changed to completed because I already approved the task. So that's basically what this XTP is about. It's querying the task from the task list and allows you to update the task in the task list using InfoPath. So that's basically pretty much about this presentation. I guess we can move on to questions, but before we do that, let me go back here to my slide. I just want to remind everyone that we have training coming up. We offer an InfoPath Masterclass from March 4th to 8th, and it consists of 5 half days, and this training could help you get up to speed with InfoPath, anything you need to know about in-depth InfoPath form development. You can learn from the InfoPath Masterclass. We also have a beginner class called InfoPath 101, and it's going to be an online webinar which will run on February 25th to 28th. So if you're interested, you can email coursemanager@qdabra.com for more information. And also please check out our forum site, infopathdev.com. We regularly check that forums for any InfoPath questions that you might have. We can answer your InfoPath questions there. So please check the forum. So I guess I can move on now to questions. I'm having some difficulty expanding the questions, but I think the first question is from Martin. What is XTP? Oh, an XTP is an XML template part. It's actually an InfoPath section that you can add to your InfoPath forms. You can reuse it to any InfoPath forms that you have. If you go to your InfoPath designer and select New, there is a template part section here where you can select blank and then select Design Form. And that's how you create an XML template part. And if you save this template part, once you finish, of course, designing it, and you can add that template part to your form just like how I showed you earlier, and then inject it to any form that you want.
Joanne?
Yes?
If you hover over the white space right above where it says chat, you should be able to drag that Q&A window down. I know it's a little tricky to expand that box.
Oh, and yeah. So sorry about that.
That's okay.
It's going back. I don't know why.
Let's see, the next question looks like it's from Naden.
Yeah.
It says, can this XTP part be integrated into an existing SPD workflow task form, browser compatible, already customized with InfoPath, accessible from the workflow email notification in Outlook?
Okay, that's question is quite long. Can this XTP part be integrated into an existing SPD workflow task form? I'm not entirely sure if you can integrate it to an existing workflow that you designed using SharePoint Designer, but as long as it is a task list workflow and you have the same fields that is in the CAML template that the XML template part is using, like it matches those fields assigned to status and ID, you're good to go. You can use it to that existing SPD workflow. And yes, it's browser compatible. Like I showed you, the expense report showed in the browser with the template part section. Can you please elaborate more on what a QID is, from Catherine and Cheta? I'm not sure if I mentioned anything about the QID, but maybe you're pertaining to the grid that I was talking about earlier. The grid is the ID of the task list, and it's a unique ID for lists in SharePoint. I don't know how to elaborate more about that, but it's basically just an ID, a grid showing a unique identifier. I'm still having some issues with the question here, so forgive me about that.
Brian says, I had to step out and missed where Q tasks section was inserted from. Is that in Q rules?
Can you repeat that again, please?
The Q tasks section, where that's inserted from?
It's called Qdabra task XTP, and we inserted it to a sample form, expense report form that comes with this package. It's not using Q rules. You can customize this XML template part, this task XTP, to any of your forms without using Q rules.
Let's see, Ralph wants to know if samples will be sent out and if there's anything you need to do to request the samples. Yes, if you would like the samples from today, the presentation and samples, if you would please complete the feedback survey that will appear at the end of the webinar. I believe the webinar survey is also sent out in the follow-up email as well, but if you would like the samples, please do send your feedback and we will get that sent out to you. And then let's see, Naden has another question. Does it use any code injection?
No, like I said, it's completely codeless. We don't use any codes in this template part. You just inject it to your forms, and you don't need to learn how to write codes or anything. Just follow the document that we're going to send you, and you're good to go. Are there any other questions?
Let's see. No, there's a comment from Samir, but not really a question. And there's one. Will I be able to use it with a SharePoint list?
The task is a list, but if you're asking if you can use the task XTP to a list, no, you can't, because you can only publish InfoPath Forms to a form library, and the form library submits the task to the task list. answer that question.
Yeah, it says InfoPath can be used to customize SharePoint lists and workflow task forms. Oh, okay. Let's see. I think the question was, can you use the XTP with any SharePoint list, not just a task list?
Yes, you can customize the XTP to use a different task list, but you need to modify the CAML template to use the columns that you're using in your own list, because the template part is designed to submit to the default task list in SharePoint. You just need to modify the columns. And yes, the answer is yes. You need to edit the columns of the CAML template.
Does it require sandbox?
I don't think it requires sandbox because it doesn't have any codes in it. As long as you can publish the form to the browser without any errors, the form will work just fine.
And Jennifer says, okay, so I would need a CAML editor and have to change the CAML template for that. Great. Thanks.
Yes.
And Naden says, I was making a comparison between the QRules submit to SharePoint command. If that helps.
He was asking about a comparison?
Asking about the QRule, if it's, I guess, not sure. QRules submit to SharePoint command.
The previous webinar, the task template part is using QRules, and it's using submit to SharePoint list command to submit to the task list. And this is entirely the same thing, but in this template part, we're using the CAML method, but there's no difference between them. It's entirely the same thing, but in this scenario, we're not using QRules, we're using CAML. So we're providing people different options. Like, so if you don't have QRules, you can use this option if you want to submit to tasks.
Let's see. QRules uses code, which requires sandbox, and then that's from Naden. And Jennifer says, if we use QRules submit to SharePoint list command, then the form contains code, which might require sandbox, correct?
Yes. Yes, it might require sandbox, but this template part will not, because it doesn't have any code, unless your form where you're going to inject the template part has code in it. Then you're going to need to have sandbox.
One other question came in and is asking, what is sandbox, for those who don't know?
I don't have a specific description of what sandbox it is, but I think it's a SharePoint 2010 feature that allows people to publish InfoPath Forms that has code without admin approving it. So if you enable sandbox in your SharePoint, you'll be able to publish forms that has code to your SharePoint.
Let's see. Last one is, it would be interesting to actually see how you were able to submit to the task list.
I'm pretty sure I've already showed that part in the demo.
It says the demo is using form-based logic to simulate the workflow logic.
Yes, it's using form-based logic in the task XTP to submit and update the task item in the task list. So it's basically just using form rules and formatting rules to manipulate the task and display it in the tasks section.
Let's see. Jennifer provided us with a quick definition of sandbox. It says sandboxing is a server configuration that allows you to deploy templates that contain code. Without sandbox being enabled, you have to give the template to the central server admin and have him or her deploy the template. So hopefully that helps explain.
Yeah, thanks for providing that description, Jennifer.
Perfect.
So I guess there are no more questions. Thanks again for joining us. I hope that the samples, forms, and the XTP, as well as the documentation, you can also do one of these scenarios to your forms and check it, and then implement the task XTP to your own form solutions. So thanks again, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, and don't forget to fill out the feedback form.